that, we're going to send a notice out. Oops, there we go. And then make sure that it's registered on Facebook. Yep. Okay, we're ready to go. All right. Alrighty. So let's chant. I think we'll chant Lalasa Mai again, which is Goranga Bhavitehami, which is one of my favorites. Oops, something is not in tune. Okay. Ulakasari Atiade Morite Nayane Babelir Kuranga Morite Hame Ulakasari Atiade Morite Yane Babelir Arakabe Nitai Jander Corona Hoibe Samsara Bashana Kape Duchoibe Arakabe Nitai Jander Corona Hoibe Samsara Bashana Mona Kape Duchoibe Vishaya Chati Akave Shudave Mana Bihamahira Shri Vrindavana Vishaya Chati Akave Shudave Mana Abhihamahira Shri Vrindavana Rupa Gathabale Oipea Kapte Kabihamabucha Pose Yugalandirate Oibe Akuti Kabe sarir ati ati retain ayane babelir kurang kabalide ave polaka sharir adi ade retain ayane babelir Pulaka sharir adi ade bulite nayane mabilir Ya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada 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 Vichako Haribo 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 Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paramahansa also Tena Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace Savaya Charananda Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Hridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Go Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Garadha Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopi Gopinath Sayamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Mathuranam Ki Jai Jagannath Swami Ki Jai Manamai Ki Jai Shrimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is to the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Bachani Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarni. So we are continuing with our study of the Krishna book, the prayers by the Personified Vedas. I think we'll probably finish that chapter today, and then we'll continue with the Krishna book after that, and then we'll probably finish the Krishna book, I would say, by the end of the year, most likely, and move on to the next literature. Let's read the translation to this poem by Narottama Das Thakur. When will that opportune moment come to me when I shiver upon chanting the name of Lord Gauranga? When will I cry while chanting Hare Krishna? When will I receive the causeless mercy of Lord Nityananda so that my desires for material enjoyment become insignificant? When will my mind be purified of material anxieties and desires so that I can understand Vrindavana? When shall I be very eager to study the books left by the 6 Goswamis so that I can understand the conjugal love of Radha and Krishna? The lotus feet of the 6 Goswamis are my only shelter in constant separation from them. I remain Narottama Das. So Narottama Das Thakur Ki Jai. So let's go into the Krishna book. Om Gana Timidandasha Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmeditam Yena Tasmai Shigurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. Okay, let's share the screen. Here we go. We're in the middle of that chapter. Actually, it's the 4th day of reading this chapter. Let me just get set up here so I can check on everybody simultaneously. All right. Here we go. So we actually talked about yesterday, we read about the Sankhya philosophy. That is the atheistic Sankhya philosophy, which means to analyze the material elements and try to figure things out in that way. We also talked about the Mimamsa philosophy, the Karma Mimamsa philosophy, which states that even if there is a God or isn't a God, it doesn't really make a difference, because if there is a God, he has to follow karma, and if there is not a God, karma is supreme anyway. So these are both atheistic philosophies. Then we're going to talk about the Vaisheshika philosophy. Then there are the philosophers headed by Gautama and Kanada. They minutely study the cause and effect of the material elements and ultimately come to the conclusion that atomic combination is the original cause of creation. At present, the materialistic scientists follow in the footsteps of Gautama and Kanada, who propounded this theory called Paramanuvada. Paramanu means a very, very tiny particle. The process of understanding things according to the tiny particles, the atoms, or the molecules, or the protons, electrons, muons. Anyway, this theory, however, cannot be supported, for the original cause of everything is not inert atoms. In other words, they also say everything came about by chance, which is ridiculous, because we do not find any complex thing within this world coming about by chance. And the material energy, and specifically the biological creatures, are infinitely much more complex than any machine we have ever seen or will ever see. So how can it come about by chance? This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, as well as in the Vedas, where it is stated, Eko Narayana Asit, only Narayan existed before the creation. Srimad Bhagavatam and the Vedanta Sutra also say that the original cause is sentient, that it senses both indirectly and directly, cognizant of everything within this creation. Of course, that's Bhagavatam states that, as well as the Vedanta Sutra. So the Lord is conscious directly of everything within this creation. And he's also conscious indirectly, because he designed the whole thing. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Ahang sarvasya prabhavaha. That's, of course, one of the nutshell verses in the Gita, 10.8. I am the original cause of everything, and matak sarvam pravartate. From me, everything comes into existence, or everything flows. Therefore, atoms may form the basic combinations of material existence, but these atoms are generated from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, the philosophy of Gautama and Kanada cannot be supported. Similarly, the impersonalists, headed by Ashtavakra, so what we were discussing in the last paragraph is called Vaisheshika, and so this next one is actually called Uttaramimamsa. So there's Karma Mimamsa and Uttaramimamsa. Uttaramimamsa has two parts. One is the impersonalist, the other one is the personalist. But here, Srila Prabhupada is talking about impersonalists. Similarly, impersonalists headed by Ashtavakra, later on by Shankaracharya, accept the impersonal Brahman effulgence as the cause of everything. According to their theory, the material manifestation is temporary and unreal, whereas the impersonal Brahman effulgence is reality. But this theory cannot be supported either, because the Lord himself says in Bhagavad Gita that the Brahman effulgence rests on his personality. It is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita that the Brahman effulgence is the personal bodily rays of Krishna. Yasha Prabha Pravanto Jagananda Koti Koti Sha Shesha Vasudadi Vibhuti Bidam. As such, impersonal Brahman cannot be the original cause of the cosmic manifestation. The original cause is the all-perfect, sentient personality of Godhead Govinda. So because it requires intelligence to design the cosmic creation. When you have the impersonal Brahman, which is variety-less, you can't have variety coming from something that's variety-less. That's common sense. The most dangerous theory of the impersonalist is that when God comes as an incarnation, he accepts a material body created by the three modes of nature. This Mayavada theory has been condemned by Lord Chaitanya as most offensive. He said that anyone who accepts the transcendental body of the personality of Godhead to be made of material nature commits the greatest offense at the lotus feet of Vishnu. Similarly, the Bhagavad Gita also states that when the personality of Godhead descends in a human form, only fools and rascals deride him. Avijananti Mamudha. That's the verse in the Gita. This actually occurred when Lord Krishna, Lord Ram, and Lord Chaitanya moved within human society as human beings. Yeah. Many people thought them to be just ordinary living entities, or maybe a living entity with a little more power. The personified Vedas condemn the impersonal conception as a gross misrepresentation. In the Brahma Samhita, the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is described as Ananda Chinmaya Rasa, such Ananda Vigraha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead possesses a spiritual body, not a material body. He can enjoy anything through any part of his body, and therefore he is omnipotent. The limbs of the material body can perform only a particular function. For example, the hands can hold but cannot see or hear. But because the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is made of Ananda Chinmaya Rasa and is thus such Ananda Vigraha, Brahma Samhita 5.1, he can enjoy anything and do anything with any of his limbs. Angani Yasha Sakalendriya Dri Tibanti. So, because it's spiritual. Our limbs or our senses are limited because they're structured materially in a certain way. Acceptance of the spiritual body of the Lord as material is dictated by the tendency to equate the Supreme Personality of Godhead with the conditioned soul. In other words, God's not like us. The conditioned soul has a material body. Therefore, if God also had a material body, then the impersonalistic theory that the Supreme Personality of God and the living entities are one and the same can be very easily propagated. Krishna says in the Gita, Jopi Samari Atma Putanam Isharo Pishram Pakadim Swamadistaya Sambhavami Atma Maya. When I come down to this earth, I don't take a material body, I come in my original self-same form. Factually, when this Supreme Personality of Godhead comes, he exhibits a non-material body, and thus there is no difference between his childish body when he's lying in the lap of Mother Yashoda and his so-called grown-up body fighting with the demons. Prabhupada uses this example quite often. In his childhood body, he also fought with demons such as Putana, Trinavarta, and also with strength equal to that which he fought in his youth against demons like Dandavakra and Chishupal. In material life, as soon as the conditioned soul changes his body, he forgets everything of his past body. But from the Bhagavad Gita, we understand that because Krishna has a Satchidananda body, eternity full of knowledge and bliss, he did not forget instructing the sun god about the Bhagavad Gita millions of years ago, which is what Krishna states in the Gita. Arjuna, he changes his body. The Lord is therefore known as Purushottama because he is transcendental to material and spiritual existence. That he is the cause of all causes means he is the cause of the spiritual world and the material world as well. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is omnipotent and omniscient. That means all potent, unlimited potency, unlimited knowledge, and awareness. Not only knowledge, but awareness. Therefore, because the material body can be neither omnipotent nor omniscient, the Lord's body is surely not material. In the Mayavadi theory that the personality of Godhead comes within this material world with a material body cannot be supported by any means. It can be concluded that the theories of the materialistic philosophers are generated from temporary illusory existence, like the conclusions in a dream. Such conclusions certainly cannot lead us to the absolute truth. The absolute truth can be realized only through devotional service. As the Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhakta Mam Avijanati, Bhagavad Gita 18:55, only by devotional service can one understand me. Bhakta Mam Avijanati Avanyas Chatmi Tatvada. Sridhar Swami, Srila Sridhar Swami has composed a nice verse in this regard, which states, "My dear Lord, let others engage in false argument and dry speculation, theorizing upon great philosophical theses. Let them loiter in the darkness of ignorance and illusion, falsely enjoying as if very learned scholars, although they are without knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As far as I am concerned, I wish to be liberated simply by chanting the holy names of the all-beautiful Supreme Personality of Godhead. Madhava, Vamana, Trinayana, Sankarsana, Shipati, and Govinda. Simply by chanting your transcendental names, O Lord, Madhupati, the Lord of Mathura. Let me become free from the contamination of this material existence." In other words, a devotee enjoys, that's the main thing, doesn't get too much into philosophical speculation, but devotees enjoy it. Just like, probably I told the story, it's like an example story, illustrative, that one time an apple sort of like either fell off the tree or was cut down from a tree, and so you had two philosophers argue with each other: did this apple fall off the tree or was it cut down by someone? And this way they're going back and forth about the apple. Meantime, the devotee walks by, picks up the apple, offers it to Krishna, and eats it and enjoys it. In this way, the personified Vedas say, "Dear Lord, when a living entity by your grace only comes to the right conclusion about your exalted transcendental position, he no longer bothers with the different theories manufactured by the mental speculators or so-called philosophers. This is a reference to the speculative theories of Gautama, Kanada, that's Vaisheshika, Patanjali, that's yoga, and Kapila, that's the atheistic Kapila, not the real Kapila. That's Sankhya. There are actually two Kapilas. One Kapila, the son of Kardama Muni, is an incarnation of God, and the other is an atheist of the modern age. The atheistic Kapila is often misrepresented to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Kapila, the incarnation of Godhead, appeared as the son of Kardama Muni long, long ago during the time of Swayambhuva Manu. The modern age is the age of Vaivasvata Manu, so it's millions of years ago. According to Mayavada philosophy, this manifested world or material world is mithya, or maya, false. The Mayavad preaching principle is Brahma Satcham Jagan Mithya. Only the Brahman effulgence is true, and the cosmic manifestation is illusory or false. But according to Vaishnava philosophy, this cosmic manifestation is true because it is caused by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's true, but it's temporary. So if we take it as eternal, that's the illusion. But if we take it as temporary, and it really exists, yes, that's true. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that he enters within this material world by one of his plenary portions, and thus the creation takes place. From the Vedas, also we can understand that this asat, or temporary cosmic manifestation, is an emanation from the supreme sat, or fact. From the Vedanta Sutra, also it is understood that everything has emanated from the Supreme Brahman. Therefore, the Vaishnavas do not take this cosmic manifestation to be false, because the Supreme Personality Godhead has entered this cosmic manifestation in the form of his plenary expansion and caused the creation. The Vaishnava philosophers see everything in this material world in relationship with the Supreme Lord. This conception of the material world is very nicely explained by Srila Rupa Goswami, who says that when persons renounce the material world as illusory or false, without knowing that the material world is a manifestation of the Supreme Lord, their renunciation is of no value. It's false renunciation, falgu renunciation. Because to give up something that was never yours to begin with is stupid. Just like if I go and you have a nice car and I say, I renounce your car, that's stupid because it's your car. I can renounce my car, but ultimately nothing belongs to us. So what can we renounce? Real renunciation is called Yukta Vairagya, which means understanding everything belongs to Krishna and using it in Krishna's service. The Vaishnavas, not Vaishnavas, however, are free from attachment to this world because, although the material world is generally accepted as an object of sense gratification, the Vaishnavas are not in favor of sense gratification and therefore not attached to material activities. The Vaishnava accepts this material world according to the regulative principles of the Vedic injunctions and works without attachment. Since the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the original cause of everything, the Vaishnava sees everything in relationship with Krishna even in this material world. By such advanced knowledge, everything becomes spiritualized. In other words, everything in the material world is already spiritual, but due to our lack of knowledge, we see things as material. That's actually a very heavy statement. Everything is spiritual because it's been created by Krishna, meant to serve Krishna, but we have the improper vision of everything. Of course, still there is the physical energy, but the physical energy is actually spiritual because it's created by Krishna. There is a difference between the physical energy and the transcendental energy. So the personified Vedas present the example that those seeking gold do not reject gold earrings, gold bangles, or anything else made of gold simply because they are shaped differently from the original gold. All living entities are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord and are qualitatively one with Him, but they are now differently shaped. It's interesting. In 8,400,000 species of life, just like many different ornaments manufactured from the same source of gold. As one who is interested in gold accepts all the differently shaped gold ornaments, so a Vaishnava, knowing well that all living entities are of the same quality as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, accepts all living entities as eternal servants of God. A Vaishnava then has ample opportunity to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply by reclaiming these conditioned, misled living entities, training them in Krishna consciousness, and leading them back home, back to Godhead. The fact is that the minds of the living entities are now agitated by the three material qualities, and the living entities are therefore transmigrating as if in dreams from one body to another. When their consciousness is changed into Krishna consciousness, however, they immediately fix Krishna within their hearts, and thus their path towards liberation becomes clear. So in all the Vedas, the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entities are stated to be of the same quality, Chaitanya, or spiritual. This is confirmed in the Padma Purana, wherein it is said that there are two kinds of spiritual entities. One is called the Jiva, and the other is called the Supreme Lord. From Lord Brahma down to the Ant, all living entities are Jivas, whereas the Lord is the Supreme Four-handed Vishnu or Janardana. So in other words, Ekala Ishvara Krishna Ara Sabda Brecha. There's one Supreme Controller, one God. And we are subordinate Nicho Nichanam, Chaitanas Chaitananam, Eko Bahunam Yogadaratikam. He is maintaining us, and we are the plural living entities, or Anu, or small. Strictly speaking, the word Atma can be applied only to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but because the living entities are its parts and parcels, sometimes the word Atma is applied to them also. That's why I call Jiva. Oh yeah, that's the next sentence. The living entities are therefore called Jivatma, and the Supreme Lord is called Paramatma, the small Atma soul, and the Supreme Soul, that is Krishna. Okay. Both the Paramatma and the Jivatma are within this material world, and therefore this material world has a purpose other than sense gratification. So the question was raised the other day. Someone asked me the question, does the Paramatma go to the spiritual world? No. The Paramatma expansion of the Lord is only within this world. The conception, because in the spiritual world, you don't need Krishna in your heart because Krishna is your life and soul. And you're just controlled by bhakti. And you're given direct intelligence by Krishna how to serve him. The conception of life of sense gratification is illusion, but the conception of service by the Jivatma, that's us, to the Paramatma, Supreme Soul, even in this material world, is not at all illusory. Actually, a person who served Krishna in this material world is called Jivan Mukta. That means someone who's liberated even in this world. A Krishna conscious person is fully aware of this fact, and thus he does not take this material world to be false, but acts in reality of transcendental service. The devotee therefore sees everything in this material world as an opportunity to serve the Lord. He does not reject anything as material, quite a heavy statement, but dovetails everything in the service of the Lord. Thus, a devotee is always in the transcendental position, and everything he uses becomes spiritually purified by being used in the Lord's service. Sridhar Swami has composed a nice verse in this regard. I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is always manifested as reality, even within this material world, which is considered by some to be false. The conception of the falsity of this material world is due to a lack of knowledge, but a person advanced in Krishna consciousness sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead in everything. This is an actual realization of the Vedic aphorism, Sarvam Kal Vidam Brahma. Everything is Brahman. So everything comes from Krishna. So the personified Vedas continue, Dear Lord, yet less intelligent men take to other ways of self-realization, but actually there's no chance of becoming purified from the material contamination or of stopping the repeated cycle of birth and death unless one is a thoroughly pure devotee. And the only way to make progress towards becoming a thoroughly pure devotee is to get the shelter of a thoroughly pure devotee. And we are fortunate to have Prabhupada's shelter. Dear Lord, everything rests on your different potencies and everyone is supported by you, as stated in the Vedas. Eko Bahunam Yogadaratikam. That's the verse I just quoted from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, which basically says there is Eko Bahunam Yogadaratikam. There is many plural living entities, and there's one supreme living entity, and the supreme living entity is maintaining all the plural living entities. In other words, Krishna is maintaining us. Therefore, your lordship is the supporter and maintainer of all living entities, demigods, human beings, and animals. Everyone is supported by you, and you are also situated in everyone's heart. In other words, you are the root of the whole creation. Therefore, those who engage in your devotional service without deviation, who always worship you, actually pour water on the root of the universal tree. That's an example that Prabhupada used oftentimes. He said, if you try to render service to humanity, it's like pouring water on the different leaves, and the tree doesn't absorb water through the leaves. Plus, you can only do one leaf at a time, or 10 leaves at a time, or whatever. But if you pour water on the root of the tree, all the leaves in the tree become saturated with water. So we serve Krishna, then everybody becomes benefited. By devotional service, therefore, one satisfies not only the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but also others, all others, because everyone is maintained and supported by him. Because a devotee understands the all-pervasive feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he is the most practical philanthropist and altruist. Such pure devotees, thoroughly engaged in Krishna consciousness, very easily overcome the cycle of birth and death, and they as much as jump over the head of death. Boom! A devotee is never afraid of death or changing his body. His consciousness is transformed into Krishna consciousness, and even if he does not go back to Godhead, even if he transmigrates to another body, he has nothing to fear, as long as we can serve Krishna and have devotees association. A vivid example is Bharata Maharaj. Although in his next life he became a deer, in the life after that he became completely free from all material contamination and was elevated to the kingdom of God. In other words, in order to avoid bad association, Bharata Maharaj acted as a stupid person. That's why he was called Jada Bharata. And he only manifested his great exalted knowledge when he was questioned directly by King Rahugana. a very important part of the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavad Gita affirms, therefore, that a devotee is never vanquished. Kuntya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati. My devotee is never lost. A devotee's path to the spiritual kingdom, back home, back to Godhead, is guaranteed. Wow. Of course, not guaranteed in this lifetime, but it will be in the future for everyone. So, even though a devotee slips in one birth, the continuation of his Krishna consciousness elevates him further and further until he goes back to Godhead. Krishna says, Swapamapya Dharma Shatrayate Mahato Bhayat. In this endeavor, there's no loss or diminution. So if you're 5% Krishna conscious, you will take up from that point in the next life. If you're 10%, take up from that point. If 50%, take up from that point. Or 1%, take up from that point. You don't lose it. Everything material, you lose. 100% of everything material you lose. You lose your car, your family, your nice body that you've been pampering through your whole life. Everything gets lost. Your house, everything. Not only does a pure devotee purify his own personal existence, but whoever becomes his disciple also becomes purified and is ultimately able to enter the kingdom of God without difficulty. In other words, not only can a pure devotee easily surpass death, but by his grace his followers can also do so without difficulty. The power of devotional service is so great that a pure devotee can electrify another person by his transcendental instruction on crossing over the ocean of nescience. That's what we realized when we met Prabhupada. The instructions of a pure devotee to his disciple are also very simple. No one feels any difficulty in following in the footsteps of pure devotees of the Lord. Why? Because the pure devotee adapts the process of Krishna consciousness according to time, place, and circumstance. Like when Prabhupada first came, he was thinking of having his disciples chant 64 rounds a day. Prabhupada reduced it to 32 when he saw the devotees couldn't do that. And when he saw the devotees couldn't even do that, he reduced it to 16. Anyone who follows in the footsteps of recognized devotees such as Lord Rama, Lord Shiva, Kumaras, Manu, Kapila, King Prahlad, King Janaka, Shukadeva Goswami, Yamaraj, and their followers in disciplined succession very easily finds the door of liberation open. On the other hand, those who are not devotees but are engaged in uncertain processes of self-realization, such as jnana, that means just through knowledge, like Sankhya philosophy, yoga, like the yoga process, and karma, that's a karma yoga or a karma mimamsa, are understood to be still contaminated. Such contaminated persons, although apparently advanced in self-realization, cannot liberate even themselves, what to speak of those who follow them. Such non-devotees are compared to chained animals, for they are not able to go beyond the jurisdiction or the formalities of a certain type of faith. Wow, that is a heavy statement. Formalities. So we have to get to the essence of Krishna consciousness, not just the formalities. In the Bhagavad Gita, they are condemned as Veda Vadarata. In other words, they're just entrapped in the Vedas and they can't understand what the Vedas are about. Vedeshu Durlabham, Adurlabham Atma Bhakta. But the devotees, they can understand. That's what the Brahma Samhita says. Vedeshu Durlabham, Adurlabham Atma Bhakta. But very easy to understand for devotees. They cannot understand the Vedas deal with activities and the material modes of nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Krishna himself says that. Actually, Prabhupada's going to paraphrase it here. But as Lord Krishna advised Arjuna, one has to go beyond the jurisdiction of the duties prescribed in the Vedas and take to Krishna consciousness. Devotional service. Here Prabhupada is going to quote that verse. The Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, Nistrai gunyo bhavarjuna. My dear Arjuna, just try to become transcendental to the Vedic rituals. Of course, the rest of that verse is Trigunya Vishya Veda Nistrigunya Bhavarjuna Nirdwandvo Nidyasapushto Niryogishe Mahatmavan The Vedas mainly deal with the three modes of nature. You should rise above these things and become transcendental. Atmavan, established in the self. This transcendental position is beyond the Vedic ritualistic performances and devotional service. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord clearly says that persons who are engaged in this devotional service without adulteration, adulteration means anything else mixed in, no other motive, are situated in Brahman. Actual Brahman realization means Krishna consciousness and engagement in devotional service. The devotees are therefore real brahmacharis because their activities are always in Krishna consciousness devotional service. So here, Prabhupada is using the word brahmachari not simply to indicate let's say a level in the varnashram system. You know, you have brahmacharis, grahasas, vanaprasthas, sannyasis. Your brahmacharis mean single people in that context, but brahmachari in this context means someone who is absorbed in the Supreme Brahman. And so you can have brahmacharis, everybody can be a brahmachari in that respect, even if one externally has a wife and family. That's why Prabhupada would talk about grahasta brahmacharis. The Krishna consciousness movement therefore issues a supreme call to all kinds of religionists, asking them with great authority to join this movement by which one can learn how to love God and thus surpass all formulas and formalities of scriptural injunction. A person who cannot overcome the jurisdiction of stereotyped religious principles is compared to an animal chained up by his master. The purpose of all religion is to understand God and develop one's dormant love of Godhead. If one simply sticks to the religious formulas and formalities but does not become elevated to the position of love of God, he is considered to be a chained animal. In other words, if one is not in Krishna consciousness, he's not eligible for liberation from the contamination of material existence. Pretty heavy stuff. Srila Sridhar Swami has composed a nice verse in this regard. Let others engage in severe austerities, let others fall to the land from the tops of hills and give up their lives. Yet others travel to many holy places of pilgrimage for salvation, or let them engage in the deep study of philosophy and Vedic literature. Let the mystic yogis engage in their meditational service, and let the different sects engage in unnecessary arguing as to which is the best. But it is a fact that unless one is Krishna conscious, unless one is engaged in devotional service, and unless one has the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he cannot cross over this material ocean. An intelligent person, therefore, gives up all stereotyped ideas and joins the Krishna conscious movement for factual liberation. The personified Vedas continued in their prayers, Dear Lord, your impersonal features explained in the Vedas. You have no hands, but you can accept all sacrifices offered to you. You know, material hands, that is. You have no legs, but you can walk more swiftly than anyone else. This is, of course, in the Ishopanishad. Although you have no eyes, you can see whatever happens in the past, present, and future. Although you have no ears, you can hear everything that is said. Although you have no mind, you know everyone and everyone's activities, past, present, and future, and yet no one knows who you are. You know everyone, but no one knows you. Therefore, you are the oldest and supreme personality of Godhead. So, all these statements, you have no this, you have no that, you don't know that, are indication that there's no material mind senses, because to know everybody means you have to have some sort of mind, spiritual mind. Similarly, in another part of the Vedas, another point is that Krishna doesn't have a mind. He is a mind. He is his senses. There's no duality. We have a body. We have a mind. We have senses. But all these things are dualistic because they're different than us. Everybody understands that. Similarly, another part of the Vedas, it says you have nothing to do. You are all so perfect in your knowledge and potency that everything becomes manifest simply by your will. There is no one equal to or greater than you, and everyone acts as your eternal servant. Thus, the Vedic statements affirm that the Absolute has no legs, no hands, no eyes, no ears, no mind, and yet he can act through his potencies and fill the needs of all living entities. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, his hands and legs are everywhere, for he is all pervasive. Also, he's all pervasive in that sense, but also he is localized at the same time. The hands, legs, ears, and eyes of all living entities are acting and moving by the direction of the super soul sitting within the living entity's heart. Unless the super soul is present, it is not possible for the hands and legs to be active. The Supreme Personality of God is so great, independent, and perfect that even without having any eyes, legs, or ears, he is not dependent on others for his activities. On the contrary, others are dependent on him for the activities of their different sense organs. Unless the living entity is inspired and directed by the super soul, he cannot act. So the reason we have eyes, ears, and stuff like that is that these are qualities that the Supreme Lord, I wouldn't even use the word has, but the Supreme Personality of God is manifested in his presence. He has legs, arms, spiritual legs, arms, and we have material legs, arms, etc., that are actually reflections of his. The fact is that ultimately the absolute truth is the Supreme Person, but because he acts through his different potencies, which are impossible for the gross materialist to see, the materialist accept him as impersonal. For example, one can observe the personal artistic work in a painting of a flower, and one can understand that the color adjustment, the shape, and so on have demanded the minute attention of an artist. The artist's work is clearly exhibited in the painting or different blooming flowers, but the gross materialist, without seeing the hand of God in such artistic manifestations as the actual flowers blooming in nature, concludes that the absolute truth is impersonal. Actually, the absolute is personal, but he is independent. He does not require to personally take a brush and colors to paint the flowers, for his potencies act so wonderfully that it appears that flowers have come into being without the aid of an artist. The impersonal view of the absolute truth is accepted by less intelligent men because unless one is engaged in the service of the Lord, one cannot understand how the Supreme is acting. One cannot even know the Lord's name. Everything about the Lord's activities and personal features is revealed to a devotee only through his loving service attitude. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is said, Bhaktaram Jagatapasam, that's 529, famous verse, which Prabhupada titled the Peace Formula. Bhaktaram Jagatapasam Sarvalokameshwaram Suradam Sarvabhutanam Gyatvam Shanti Richati. One understands the Lord is the enjoyer of all sacrifice and the results of all austerities, then one can be peaceful. Then the Lord says, Sarva Lokamaheshwaram, I am the proprietor of all planets. So that is the position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, while he is present in Goloka Vrindavan enjoying transcendental pleasure in the company of his eternal associates, the gopis and the cowherd boys. All over the creation, his potencies are acting under his direction without disturbing his eternal pastime. So Krishna's potencies or energies are first-class servants. They know what he wants. He doesn't even have to ask them. That's a first-class servant. They know his desire. They know what he wants as far as the living entities of the material world, and they do it. So let's see how much more we have in this chapter. Yeah, I guess we have quite a bit. All right, so let's go back. Okay, is where we left off, or leaving off right now. Okay, so now we're going to stop sharing, allow you all to ask your questions. Let me allow you. Okay, Tulsi Devi Dasi, you can ask your question.
Just a technical question. When it was listing off the different names of the forms of Krishna, and it said Trinayana, isn't that it? That's a name of Durga, isn't it? The wife of the three-eyed one. Is that also a name of Krishna?
Yeah, just like many of the names, because anytime you have a name, even the names of like Shiva means auspicious. So
Yeah. I didn't know Krishna had a three. three-eyed form?
I guess he does.
It's supposed to mean the wife of one who has three eyes.
Anyway, somehow or other Prabhupada said it, so
Okay. I didn't know if it might be an editorial mistake or something.
I don't know. I'm not that expert, but we accept it. Prabhupada is the controller of the person who has three eyes. So here's a question, a text question. Hare Krishna. As we keep reading Prabhupada's books, we start seeing Krishna more and more as the cause of all causes behind everything that happens. And sometimes we read how the material world is referred to as the so-called material world by Srila Prabhupada. Would we be correct in understanding that when one's eyes are anointed with love, praying mantra, we can see Krishna like everything, like the Uddhama Adhikari, and these realizations should not be used while preaching or attacking with one another, working with them. Yeah, obviously, uh, if one is an Uttama Adhikaris don't preach anyway. So when it's an Uttamanikari, or one sees things like that, that everything is ultimately spiritual because it's meant to be utilized in Krishna's service, we use that in preaching because we're engaging everything in Krishna's service. Everything is I see Krishna like that in everything. So we use it while preaching. We do use that vision while preaching and we use that vision while engaging in Krishna's service. Of course, we may not talk about it with everybody because for practical purposes, we do distinguish between the material and the spiritual energy. That's for practical purposes. But if we just say everything's spiritual, people get very confused. And then they'll think that whatever they're doing, their loving affairs are spiritual too. So, Bhai Chaitanya, you have a question? You can unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna, Gurudev. Please accept my humble obeisances. Gurudev, you were talking about renunciation and how Rupa Goswami was saying that just renouncing for the sake of renouncing, even this material world, is of no value. So just trying to understand in the Kunti Maharani prayers, where Kunti Maharani says, asks Krishna to sever all her ties to families and kinsmen, so she can concentrate on just the devotional service. So, Gurudev, how are we to understand that in relation to family affection and attachment, and utilizing that for Krishna's service?
Okay, well, basically, she's praying. Yeah, I was asked that question before some time ago, but basically, she's praying for Krishna to sever her material attachment to the family. Then the attachment based upon the body, but to be attached to them as souls and attached to trying to help them advance in Krishna consciousness. She's not praying for Krishna to detach her from that attachment. Because we are very attached to devotees. I mean, I'm very attached to devotees, very attached to helping devotees, but not because of the physical or bodily attachment, or not because of what they do for me, as one famous president of the United States says, don't ask what your country can do for you or you can do for your country. But in other words, not because of the physical or bodily attachment, but because of the spiritual attachment. So we should be very attached to our family members spiritually to try to help them advance in devotional service and become Krishna conscious. So, but if our attachment is based just because of the body, let's say if one has a very beautiful wife and you're very attached to her because she has eyes like lotus petals, or something like that. Yeah, I'm very attached to my beautiful, but that's material attachment. We should pray not to be attached that way because that material attachment leads to exploitation and actually impeding another living entity's spiritual life. So we should be attached to someone in the sense of a compassionate attachment to trying to help them advance spiritually. And Queen Kunti was praying to overcome the material attachment just because they were her family members. You understand?
Got it.
So,
Thank you so much, Gurudev. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Haribol. Hare Krishna.
I mean, obviously, she should be attached to the Pandavas because they're pure devotees.
Devotees, yeah.
Yeah, pure devotees. So we want to be attached to pure devotees. Okay, here's another question in the chat window. Hold on a second. Whoops. Gotta scroll up here. All right. Hare Krishna Gurudev. In the previous, Lord Brahma acted immorally by running after his daughter, and when the sons of Marichi condemned his immoral act, they were cursed for condemning Lord Brahma's immoral act. I just want to understand what was wrong on their part. Because they made fun of him and they made it a public scene. Obviously, if someone commits an immoral act, we don't condone it. We do condemn it, but we don't have to broadcast it all over the place. There's a difference. When they have a chance of rectifying themselves. For example, I remember there was one sannyasi sometime. I won't mention his name. I do remember his name, and he left the sannyasa order of life, and another sannyasi broadcast the information almost like not gleefully, but just like without any sensitivity. And then Prabhupada got angry at the sannyasi who was broadcasting the information. He said, "You have made it difficult for him to come back." So it's just a question of how you deal with it. You know, obviously, if someone is a danger to society, you do want to broadcast it. Like if someone's a child abuser or something like that. But Lord Brahma didn't actually commit any act. He was just chasing his daughter at that particular point. And he corrected himself. He actually gave up that mentality. In the Bhagavatam, it's described he gave up that body out of because it's correcting himself. And obviously, we do condemn immoral acts, but we hate the sin and not the sinner, and we don't have to just defame someone for doing something immoral, unless they're a danger, clear and present danger for someone else. I mean, there's a fine line there, but they actually were practically laughing, and that's to laugh at someone's fall down or misfortune is actually condemnable. Good question. Okay, nice questions today. So it is time to end. Thank you very much. And tomorrow, hopefully, we'll be able to finish this prayers of the personified Vedas. Hopefully, I think we're going to be finishing with this chapter tomorrow. This is like the fourth day we've been reading this chapter, and tomorrow will be the fifth day. Okay, on that happy note, all glories to His divine grace, A.C. Bhakti.